Hello, I'm your host, Peter Komendowski, and welcome to Surviving Bad, where we explore Iowa's stories of survival, hope, and inspiration. Today we're talking about meth, a problem that does not seem to go away. The most talked about drugs like marijuana and opioids dominate the news, while a new meth crisis may be brewing in Iowa. We're joined by DEA agent Russ Coulter and Division of Narcotics Enforcement Special Agent Jesse Whitmer to update us on what's happening in Iowa. Welcome to the show, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Russ, tell us a little bit about what you do and why you're here today.
Well, I've been a federal agent now for over 28 years, 23 with the Drug Enforcement Administration. I'm currently the resident agent in charge for the Cedar Rapids office. I have two offices, one in Cedar Rapids and one in the Quad Cities, and we cover 39 counties in eastern Iowa and western Illinois.
Thank you.
I'm with the Iowa Division of Narcotics Enforcement. I'm a special agent in charge. I am in charge of the southeastern portion of the state of Iowa. The state's divided into 4 separate zones, and I'm responsible for Zone 4. We have 8 agents in Zone 4, and I've been doing this. I've been a peace officer since 1998. And I've worked for narcotics enforcement since 2000.
Now, just before I ask you a little bit about meth, you had a chance to wrestle for Dan Gable then, right?
I did.
Well, that makes you a little bit of a celebrity here today, too. Sorry, Russ.
That's fine. That's fine.
Jesse, can you give us a rundown on sort of the history of meth and the time you've been there? You've got over 20 years. What sort of happened with meth in Iowa?
So when I first came over in 2000, meth at the time was it was fairly plentiful, but it was a unpure methamphetamine, usually in the 20s for percentage rate of purity. Also at that time, there were a number of methamphetamine laboratories. Actually, in 2002, I was assigned to the clandestine laboratory emergency response team. And our sole responsibility was to dismantle clan labs. During that time, Iowa had over 1,000 meth labs a year. I remained in that position till 2005. In 2005, they regulated pseudoephedrine, which is the main precursor in the manufacture of meth, which severely reduced the number of meth labs that we were seeing.
So when the meth labs went down, what happened?
The meth labs went down. We started to see an influx of imported methamphetamine again. And now, in our current state, we have an abundance of methamphetamine, but it's methamphetamine that across the state, I believe the purity for the last fiscal year was 98% pure.
Wow. Russ, now, part of your job is to protect Iowans from things like meth getting into our communities.
Correct.
How is that stuff getting here? Where's it coming from?
Well, 99% of the meth that is in the entire country, let alone in Iowa, is coming from Mexico. And it's crystal methamphetamine is what they call it because it is absolutely pure. Probably a majority of the stuff that we seize is coming back from the lab at 100%. Yeah, and like Jesse said, back when they had the meth labs, the mom and pop labs, the shake and bake labs, the one pot, some of those terms you might have heard. 15 to 25% was the purity on that, and now we're at 100.
Now, are people still making their own meth in Iowa?
Very rarely. I can't remember the last laboratory that we've maybe cleaned up. I know there may be a handful a year, but no, it's all import now.
And how much is being imported? I mean, I know it's just a guess because you don't know, but I mean,
Right.
It looks to me like you can import a lot more than you can make.
Well, that's what we say, because I'll ask how much meth is coming over the border. We don't know what we don't know. We do know that from 2012 to 2017, there was a 250% increase in meth seizures at the border.
Wow.
So all of it is coming through mostly Arizona, through conveyances, personal vehicles, commercial vehicles, and then what usually happens to it is it'll go to what I refer to as like a wholesale distribution point, and in Iowa that would be Des Moines. On the western edge it would be Omaha, so you have Omaha, Des Moines, and then up to Minneapolis, just because they sit on the major highways and interstates. So that's where the bulk of the meth would come into, and then from there they would split off.
And part of your guys' jobs is to be able to find this stuff.
Correct, yes.
Now, how many cases, meth cases, do you guys handle in a typical month? I mean,
Well, it fluctuates, but I do know that I think over 65% of the new cases that we open are meth related, just in the state of Iowa.
now, do we see it still staying up there and going up? I mean, we hear so much about marijuana and opioids and everything else. Do you see, from your point of view, meth being one of the big problems in the state?
It absolutely is. Just throughout the entire division that I'm in, we have a 30% increase in seizures. And as of last week, my office itself has already surpassed our meth seizures from all of last year.
Now, Jesse, you had mentioned something when we talked before the show. When you arrest people with meth, they often admit how they started using drugs. What was that?
Typically, the first drug that they try is marijuana, and usually that's looked at as a gateway drug. They don't come right out of the chute using meth or trying meth. It's usually something along those lines that they start with first to try.
Well, that's something we want to talk more about when we talk about protecting Iowa communities after the break. When we come back from the break, we'll take an inside look at the problem of meth and how it works its way into our communities. Stay tuned. You don't want to miss this.
One gig is the future, and Mediacom provides the most complete coverage. America's first 100% 1 gig technology network, offering gigabit speeds in every market we serve. In town or out of town, big city or rural, you've got access to the fastest. We know the future will demand more speed, so we've built a network to give you the most. 1,500 communities, 2.7 million homes, 100% 1 gig.
After the rain stops and the wind dies down, when the fire's gone out and the dust settles, we rise up together and become a force of nature all our own. As part of this community, Mediacom stands with you, doing everything we can not only to restore your service, but to help provide emergency communication access, assist relief efforts, and support our neighbors.
AT&T loves to talk about their 1 gig internet, but you can't get it at Beth's house or John's house. It's not available in JoJo's neighborhood or within 100 miles of the Smith family. The truth is, AT&T 1 gig isn't for everyone. Make sure you have access to the fastest. Switch to Mediacom Extreme and get the future-forward speed you need from the 100% gigabit technology network, the fastest for everyone.
Welcome back to Surviving Bad. I'm Peter Komendowski, and we're talking with a couple of experts in the world of narcotics, Russ and Jesse, about that twisted world of meth and how it reaches into the lives of so many Iowans. We're going to continue our conversation. Welcome back, guys.
Thank you.
Russ, so what's the business of like selling and trafficking meth like in Iowa? What is sort of the profile of what's happening here?
Yeah, well, remember when Jesse discussed the major decline in meth labs, and then it all became import from Mexico. So this crystal meth that's coming in, 100% pure, who used to produce meth in their house now have this 100% pure methamphetamine, and where they used to get grams, now they're getting ounces. The individuals that used to distribute ounce quantities of meth now are distributing pound quantities.
Now, what does an ounce or a pound mean to somebody who doesn't know anything about meth in terms of how many people would use it and how long they'd stay high, things like that?
Boy, I guess the dosage unit for methamphetamine is 1/10 of a gram.
Wow.
So with 28 grams in an ounce, you're looking at, 2,800 dosage units in just an ounce of meth.
Okay.
Multiply that times 16 ounces in a pound. So the amount of meth that is on the street right now, it's unbelievable compared to where it was in the late 90s and
And how's
mid-2000s.
the price changed over that time?
Well, just even in the last 5 or 6 years, well, when the meth labs first declined and the pounds were coming in, they were very expensive, comparably, $15,000 to $20,000 for a pound. 5 or 6 years ago, you might have been paying $9,000 or $10,000 for a pound. Now we're looking at $3,000 to $4,000 for an entire pound of meth in the Iowa area.
Well, Iowa has like 3 million people. A pound is a lot of meth, and there's lots of pounds coming into Iowa. So is this problem that what we know about, the numbers you're talking about, just the tip of an iceberg?
It is.
It is, really.
Right.
Sometimes you feel like you're, chasing shadows when there's so much out there and you can only grab a little bit.
There is. But when you have a demand, you're going to get a supply, and that's where the issue is.
Jesse, tell us a little about demand. Yeah.
Yeah, and I can put in a little bit of perspective. As far as narcotics enforcement, from June 30th of 2018 to June 30th of 2019, the Division of Narcotics Enforcement was involved in the seizure of 366 pounds of meth. That kind of going on along the lines of Russ explaining how much meth is here. And that's just the stuff that we were involved in the seizure of. That doesn't say that somebody from Russ's agency didn't see some that wasn't claimed as a stat for the state of Iowa. The other thing with the meth price, when I first started this in probably 2000, it was between $1,000 and $2,000 for an ounce of meth. Across the state now, you can get meth by the ounce for anywhere from $300 to $800. $300 being on the low end in some of the areas
And
that
it's 10, 20, 30, 400 times stronger.
Yes.
So they're getting a
Yes.
lot more dangerous product.
Yes.
Wow.
For a lot cheaper price. And also with these cases that we work, in the past, if you wanted to go out and buy something, typically you would go out, take your money, and make a transaction. Now there's a lot more willingness to front the drugs, which is you show up, they give it to you on essentially consignment, and then you pay for it later. Because the availability of it is so much more than it was in the past.
How were you able to typically initiate a bust to get this stuff? I mean, do you work with informants? Is it hospital emergency rooms? I mean, where do you get most of the leads where you can actually get some of this stuff?
A lot of it is from the community, either through cooperating individuals, tips from citizens. Nothing's changed in the way that we enforce it. It's just there's a lot more out there to try and gather and get together.
Are more people, you would think with stronger drugs, more people would be really getting hurt or dying? Are we seeing evidence of that?
Yes, I know that besides alcoholism, I think the next drug that people are going to rehab for, to treatment for, is meth now. It's definitely on the rise.
That's a great point. We'll continue on that after the break. When we return, we'll ask Russ and Jesse to talk about the connections they see between meth and other substance abuse issues, even maybe marijuana and vaping. Stay tuned. You don't want to miss this.
One gig is the future, and Mediacom provides the most complete coverage. America's first 100% 1 gig technology network, offering gigabit speeds in every market we serve. In town or out of town, big city or rural, you've got access to the fastest. We know the future will demand more speed, so we've built a network to give you the most. 1,500 communities, 2.7 million homes, 100% 1 gig.
After the rain stops and the wind dies down, when the fire's gone out and the dust settles, we rise up together and become a force of nature all our own. As part of this community, Mediacom stands with you, doing everything we can not only to restore your service, but to help provide emergency communication access, assist relief efforts, and support our neighbors.
AT&T loves to talk about their 1 gig internet, but you can't get it at Beth's house or John's house. It's not available in JoJo's neighborhood or within 100 miles of the Smith family. The truth is, AT&T 1 Gig isn't for everyone. Make sure you have access to the fastest. Switch to Mediacom Extreme and get the future-forward speed you need. From the 100% gigabit technology network, the fastest for everyone.
Welcome back to Surviving Bad. From meth to opioids, marijuana, vaping, heroin, they all seem to be connected in some twisted ways. Do they have something more in common than we think? Are there ways to manage this risk that we don't know about? Let's ask our experts. Russ, it's a big issue. What do you think are some of the solutions, and how do you approach this problem?
Well, at least with DEA, and I know all of our law enforcement partners, we do realize we are not, one, going to arrest our way out of this problem or be able to seize enough meth in the state and around the country to get us out of this issue. We do know there has to be a three-prong approach to this. One has to be education and prevention. So community outreach, speaking with our kids in school, religious organizations, just to make sure we keep the word out about the issues with meth. I mean, it's always been a problem, but it's on the rise, and heroin is well deserving of the media attention that it's getting, the opioid epidemic around the country, but methamphetamine is definitely on the rise. The second approach would definitely be treatment. Again, without the demand for a narcotic, there won't be a supply. So, and then the last approach would be the enforcement. So we need to get the word out to the people. We have to treat those that need it, and then we have to do our job and try and take what we can off the streets.
So we got that three-pronged approach you talk about with sort of prevention and education, treatment, and then the law enforcement side of it. Is there a powerful stigma that gets in the way of being able to do these things? I mean, do people look at the meth person or the meth problem as it's not my problem? Or do you encounter people in your work, the one prong of law enforcement, that maybe shows us that anybody can become a meth addict?
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely. And Jesse,
Yeah.
if you want to.
I would say it's a problem in all walks of life. We've had methamphetamine investigations where we've had essentially pillars of the community, doctors that were meth users, and they were able to function as a doctor while they were using meth. So it doesn't hit a particular group of people. It's across all walks of life.
So if you look at the people that you encounter, what would you say are some of the characteristics that might lead to them becoming involved in meth? Maybe danger signs and things that people in the community might notice. I mean, are there meth houses? Is it happening in places, in bars? Is it happening at workplaces? I mean, where do you see a lot of this trafficking going on?
Anywhere you can imagine.
Right.
It's in every community, it's in every town, it's in every city, every county has an issue right now with meth.
Why would somebody not, well, tell me why if I say, well, it's not in our community, it's not my problem. How would you tell me, maybe I should think about it because it is everywhere?
Well, I always refer back to the opioid epidemic, and that's exactly what we heard there. Not in my community, not my child, not in my school, but meth is more prevalent now than opioids in the state of Iowa. So it is in each and every community school, and we just have to get the word out.
Well, prevention, treatment, people, the Office of Drug Control Policy in Iowa, everywhere we're hearing, we're talking about these other things, we need to talk about meth. Because every time we see a victory, we close a bunch of meth labs, something else happens. And you're sort of right, it's like a demand reduction thing. So what I'm hearing is that if we don't get people to use less of these products, they will find a way to get them into Iowa and get them in our communities.
Absolutely. Supply and demand.
What can be done on the supply side to give you more resources or opportunities to keep some of this stuff off the streets?
I'm not sure where to go with that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, do we need more police officers out there? Do we need?
That's a storyline for every department and every federal agency that there is. We do work fantastic. The state of Iowa, law enforcement-wise, great cooperation between every agency. I mean, Jesse's agency and mine work hand in hand every day. I have 5 task force officers that are out of Jesse's squad that are assigned to my offices. So we're trying, we're working together, and little by little, and with knowing the education and the prevention and the treatment, I think we'll start making an impact.
Well, and I think it makes sense, yes.
I will say something as far as the demand part of that. It starts in your own home. You know, educating your own family of the dangers of methamphetamine. If you can start it in your own home, that's to me goes a long way in the first prong of prevention to keep them from being future meth users.
Well,
or
good.
meth
I want to
sellers.
continue on that because I think you guys probably have some important advice we can share with our viewers, because this can't be kept a secret. This has to be a conversation that happens. After a short break, we'll invite Russ and Jesse to share some insights and advice that may help you understand the dark side of drugs and how to protect yourself. See you after the break.
One gig is the future, and Mediacom provides the most complete coverage. America's first 100% 1 gig technology network, offering gigabit speeds in every market we serve. In town or out of town, big city or rural, you've got access to the fastest. We know the future will demand more speed, so we've built a network to give you the most. 1,500 communities, 2.7 million homes, 100% 1 gig.
After the rain stops and the wind dies down, when the fire's gone out and the dust settles, we rise up together and become a force of nature all our own. As part of this community, Mediacom stands with you, doing everything we can not only to restore your service, but to help provide emergency communication access, assist relief efforts, and support our neighbors.
AT&T loves to talk about their 1 gig internet, but you can't get it at Beth's house or John's house. It's not available in JoJo's neighborhood or within 100 miles of the Smith family. The truth is, AT&T 1 gig isn't for everyone. Make sure you have access to the fastest. Switch to Mediacom Extreme and get the future-forward speed you need. From the 100% gigabit technology network, the fastest for everyone.
After the rain stops and the wind dies down, when the fire's gone out and the dust settles, we rise up together and become a force of nature all our own. As part of this community, Mediacom stands with you, doing everything we can not only to restore your service, but to help provide emergency communication access, assist relief efforts, and support our neighbors.
Welcome back to Surviving Bad. We're talking about meth, and as you've heard today, it's closer to Iowans than ever before. Now, our guests as agents, their job is to protect us. So maybe we can find some information they'll share with us that can give us a better understanding of the risks that we face. Guys, I live in a world where a lot of people think it's not my problem and meth is never going to touch us. And you're just like everybody else. You're human beings with families and lives, and you're really highly motivated in dealing with these narcotics problems. What are some of the things you encounter that really say, man, we need to do something about this? I mean, what is some of that dark and ugly you see that you just wish we could stop?
Well, just the impact on family. I've worked in Philadelphia, St. Louis, in the Quad Cities, now in the Cedar Rapids area. And over the 28 years that I've been in federal law enforcement, I mean, just to see, it doesn't matter what kind of a narcotic or a drug it is, the impact that it has on families and the children. Again, back when the meth labs were big in Iowa, you always had to worry about kids being in where the meth labs were. So they were exposed to this. And then with the heroin opioid epidemic, we have the national take back where, you take those opioids, those prescriptions out of your medicine cabinet and get rid of them so your kids don't come across it. But with meth, and with the abundance of meth that's available now in the state, I mean, there are households with children in it where there's 10, 15, 20 pounds of this meth just sitting
And
there.
it's a highly concentrated powder that just basically, if you blow on it, can go all over the place.
It could.
So it's
Of
much
course,
more,
yes.
in some respects, toxic than it ever was when there were meth labs.
Well, especially with the purities now.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Jesse, what kind of stuff do you run into when you're out there that just makes you go, I gotta keep doing this? Because you really sound motivated about it.
It's really the children for me too. That's probably the most brutal thing when you go into some of these places to see the living conditions that they're living in. It's absolutely appalling. That's probably the thing that gets me the most. As far as danger-wise, dealing in any type of narcotic is inherently dangerous, and as you do this long enough, you realize there's usually a firearm portion to any type of narcotics case, and as the years go on, it seems like it's gotten more violent, and so we're seeing a lot more drug-related violence than even in the past, I would say.
Well, now just to finish up, Russ, as a person, what if for a parent watching, what advice would you give them?
Communicate.
Talk about this stuff.
Bottom line is to communicate. I mean, come to the realization that meth is a problem in Iowa. So is opioids, so is heroin, but don't forget about meth.
And Jesse?
I would say any opportunity that you have to be able to educate people, I would say that would be any time we can break a chain of this generational meth involvement. I've dealt with cases where we've dealt with 3 generations of the same family, and at some point we've got to educate those people so we can break that chain and break that cycle, and stop that from transferring to the next generation.
Thank you very much for everything you've shared and everything you do. And thank you for joining us on Surviving Bad. Keep your eye on Mediacom MC22 for our next episode as we explore Iowa's stories of survival, hope, and inspiration. Only on Mediacom MC22, your local programming news.